In this video, I'm going to go over adjusting and aligning the Honda depth and space rods on the Sidewinder 2. So in the manual, it's going to tell you everything you need here. This is the Honda KL-M&N. It's kit number GHMS754. Tells you that you use the 5/32 guide and cutter when you're cutting the key, but for adjustment, we're going to use the guide. We're going to do this on vice set A. And it tells you right here, setup key information. Your setup key is cut to all number 1 depths, which are shallow, on the right side, except for the first cut at the bow. First cut at the bow is cut to a number 6 depth, and follow the alignment procedure on page 15. So there are instructions in the manual on how to adjust this, but we'll try and make it a little bit easier for you with a video. So a few things I've already done to work a little bit ahead. I've removed the chip guard, which will make life a little bit easier. I've also removed the 2 Allen screws. The one right behind the vices, which locks in the depth rod, and of course the Allen screw that's in front of the spacing rod, used to lock that rod in. So those are already out of the machine. You'll need to remove those before we get going. To align the Honda rods, we've got the shorter depth rod here, and the longer space rod here, as well as the setup key that comes with the kit. I've got my 5/32 guide, GHMS156, 3/32 Allen wrench, 1/8 Allen wrench, and the handheld tip stop we'll use. With that said, first thing we're going to do is to insert our 5/32 guide into the right collet. And we're going to do that by just sliding it up into the collet. And all we need to do is make sure that we can clear the table. We're high enough to clear the table. Use my 1/8" Allen wrench to tighten that up. So the first thing we will adjust will be the depth rod. So the Honda depth rod looks like this. We want to make sure that the Allen screws are loose. That allows the hub on the end of the rod to turn. And it does so easily. So we're going to put the rod inside the machine. We want to make sure that our thumb screw over here is nice and loose and not going to have an effect on our rod at this point. And one mistake people make, they want to put the rod in the machine and start turning it with the black end. What that does is it takes all the adjustment out of the rod. So we can't do it that way. You'll see a few places in the manual, and of course we'll talk about it in the video, where we're going to use a flat screwdriver. So what we want to do is just insert the rod into the right side. When we're trying to align one of our depth rods or change a depth rod, we need to insert the 3/32 Allen wrench into the hole in the hub on the underside of the table. So to do that, we just take out the Allen screw, which we've already done obviously, and then we begin to move the carriage to the left. It's almost to the very stop at the left side of the travel of the table. But you'll see some aluminum inside the hole, and then we'll see a hole underneath there, which is the hole that we're looking for. Slide your 3/32 Allen wrench inside that. And then I'm going to take my flat screwdriver, begin turning the rod into the machine. And we're going to continue to turn that until it comes to a complete stop. Remove our 3/32 Allen wrench. Next thing I need to do is put my setup key in the machine. And again, this is the setup key. It's got a pre-cut at the head of the key. We do not want to use the side that has no pre-cut. So we want to use this side that's got the pre-cut at the head of the key. I'm going to lay that in the vise, tip stop it, and tighten it up. The next thing we want to do is lower our guide down. So we'll pick out the cut part of the key, we'll bring the guide down on top of it, and then we'll back it off just a little bit and tighten that up with the large knob in front. So now once we get our rod adjusted, we'll just be floating above the surface of the key. The next thing we need to do is we want to work on the right side of the key and set it to a number 1 position. So we're going to turn to a number 1. We're going to go over to the right side of the key, and we're going to begin tightening up our thumb screw and look for a position where we get that engaged, which I have right now. So I'm on number 1, I'm on the right side of the key. These are our different depths, but we want to use a number 1 because that's what our setup key is set to. So if I push the carriage forward right now, my guide runs into the edge of the key. And we'll get a little closer if we can here. And so we're going to put our screwdriver in the right side, in the right side of the depth rod, and we're going to turn that until we can move up and down and just barely touch the edge of the key. And I'm going to continue turning that screwdriver a little bit, a little bit, a little bit more, until I can feel some rubbing, which I do now. And so that rod is now adjusted for the number 1 depth, which means that the rest of the rod is adjusted. So at this point, I'm going to tighten up, snug up my 2 Allen screws on each side of my depth rod. Yep. And then I'm going to snug them up good. Once this is done, you should never need to readjust this rod. Okay, so we've got our depth rod adjusted. Now that we have the depth rod adjusted, I am going to remove the depth rod from the machine. I'm going to take out the setup key, loosen up my thumb screw, move over to a position where I can get the 3/32 Allen wrench in the machine, and remove the rod. And again, now that the Allen screws at the throat of the rod are set and the rod is adjusted, I can just turn it out. I don't need to use a screwdriver to do that. Next thing we'll be doing is adjusting the spacing rod. When we're changing a space rod or adjusting a space rod, we need to insert the 3/32 Allen wrench into the hole in the hub on the underside of the table. To do this, we're just going to move the carriage back towards the back of the machine. You'll see some aluminum inside the hole. That's the underside of the table. If you go a little further, you'll see a round hole under there. That's where we want to insert the 3/32 Allen wrench. And once again, Allen screws are loose, so my hub turns nice and free. Slide my setup key into the machine, or my space rod into the machine, and begin to tighten that up with a screwdriver. Until it comes to a complete stop. Which we have. At that point I can remove the 3/32 Allen wrench, bring my carriage forward, and now we're going to work off of this cut at the head of the key in the 6th position. That's cut to the deepest part of the key, or that's cut to a number 6 depth. So we're going to put our setup key back in, tighten it up. Our guide is still in a good position, and we're going to lock in, use the thumb screw over here, and lock in our spacing rod. So now what we want to do is, when we're on a number 1 position, our guide should drop into this pre-cut on the key. So we're going to move forward to that first position. Okay, so now I'm on the number 1 space position on the rod. If we look in there, our guide will not fall into that cut part of the key. So what we need to do is we put our screwdriver back in the end of the rod and we begin turning it counterclockwise. We'll get our guide closer to the head of the key, and I keep trying to push that into the opening till it seats perfectly. And there's our position. We'll snug up our Allen screws. And now both of our rods are completely adjusted and we're ready to cut Honda keys. Loosen up the large knob in the front. Disengage the space rod. Bring our carriage back out. Remove our setup key. And remove our guide.